It was a bright, sunny afternoon in Pinewood Grove. That's the name of my neighborhood, a small, quiet place where houses sit in neat rows and kids ride bikes down the street. Most people here were nice. They smiled, waved, and went about their day. At least that's what I thought when I moved in. My name's Jake, and I'd only been here for 1 month. A new house, a new start, everything felt fresh and exciting. I was ready to make this place my home, but not everyone liked that idea, especially not Karen. Karen lived right across the street from me. She wasn't like the other neighbors. Oh no, she was different. Karen was the boss of something called the HOA. That's a group of people who make rules for the neighborhood, like what color your house can be or how tall your grass can grow. Karen took her job very seriously. She always carried a clipboard in one hand, scribbling notes about everything she saw. And her eyes, they were sharp, like a hawk hunting for something to pounce on. When she looked at you, it felt like she could see right through you. Most people waved hello to me when I moved in. They'd say, "Hi Jake, welcome." But Karen, she didn't wave, she didn't smile, she just stared. Her stare was so strong it felt like it could melt steel. I swear if looks could burn, my house would have been toast by now. I'll tell you a little about me. My name's Jake, like I said, I'm just a guy who wanted a quiet life. I got this new house because I needed a change. My old place was far away and I was ready for something new. Pinewood Grove seemed perfect. The streets were clean, the trees were green, and the air smelled like flowers. I thought, this is it. This is where I'll settle down. I moved in with my stuff, some boxes, a couch, a TV, and started making the house mine. I even bought a little plant to put by the window. Everything was going great. Well, almost everything. See, that sunny afternoon, I noticed something outside. There was a tiny crack in my driveway. It wasn't a big deal, just a little line in the concrete, barely as long as my hand. I'm not lazy, so I decided to fix it. I grabbed a bucket, some stuff to fill the crack, and a shovel. Easy peasy, right? I thought I'd be done in an hour, maybe less. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and I was humming a tune. It was a perfect day to get some work done. But then I heard footsteps. Fast, angry footsteps. I looked up and there she was, Karen. Karen wasn't tall, but she walked like she owned the whole street. Her hair was pulled back tight and her lips were pressed into a thin, mad line. She held that clipboard like it was a weapon. I could tell she was coming for me. My stomach did a little flip, but I tried to stay cool. "Hey, Karen," I said, giving her a small wave. She didn't wave back. She stopped right at the edge of my driveway and pointed at the crack. "What's that?" she asked, her voice loud and sharp. I blinked. It's just a crack." "I'm fixing it," I said. Simple, right? But Karen didn't think so. Her face turned pink, like she was about to explode. "A crack," she said, like I'd just told her I was building a giant monster in my yard. "This neighborhood has rules, Jake. We don't allow messes like that." She tapped her clipboard with her pen, making little clicking sounds. I looked at the crack again. It was so small you could barely see it unless you were looking hard. "It's not a big deal," I said, shrugging. "I'll have it fixed in no time." But Karen shook her head. "No time," she snapped. "You should have fixed it the second you saw it. This is Pinewood Grove, not some sloppy dump." I took a deep breath. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted to fix my driveway and enjoy my day. "Okay, Karen," I said, "I'm on it." I thought that would make her happy. Nope, she crossed her arms and stared at me harder. "I'm watching you," she said, like I was some sneaky kid trying to steal cookies. Then she turned around and marched back to her house, her shoes clicking on the pavement. I watched her go, wondering why she cared so much about a silly little crack. But here's the thing, she didn't know something about me, something big, something that would make her flip out if she ever found out. Let me tell you a secret. I wasn't just Jake, the new guy with a cracked driveway. I was more than that, a lot more. But nobody in Pinewood Grove knew it, not Karen, not the nice lady next door, not even the kids riding their bikes. I kept it hidden because I didn't want trouble. I just wanted to live my life, fix my house, and maybe make some friends. My secret was safe, locked away like a treasure in a chest. And that day, all I cared about was patching that crack. I didn't think it would turn into a big problem. Boy, was I wrong. Karen wasn't done with me, not even close. She didn't just dislike the crack, she hated it. And she hated me for having it. I didn't know it yet, but she was already planning something. Something loud, something crazy. While I stood there with my shovel, she was across the street, plotting. She thought she was the queen of the neighborhood and I was just some new guy she could boss around. She didn't know I had a trick up my sleeve, a trick that would change everything. Let's go back to that afternoon. The sun was still high and the air was warm. I knelt down by the crack, mixing some stuff to fill it. It was easy work, just scoop, spread, smooth. I was good with my hands, always had been. Back at my old place, I fixed things all the time. Leaky faucets, wobbly chairs, you name it, I could fix it. So this crack, it was nothing. I scooped some gooey stuff into the crack and smiled. See, almost done, I said to myself. The birds kept singing and a soft breeze rustled the trees. For a minute I forgot about Karen and her clipboard. For a minute everything was peaceful. Then I heard it, a door slamming, loud. I looked up and there was Karen again. She was back on her porch, holding her phone this time. Her eyes were locked on me and she was talking fast. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but her face told me everything. She was mad, really mad. I stood up, wiping my hands on my jeans. What now? I muttered. Karen pointed at me, then at the driveway, then back at me. She was yelling into her phone, waving her free hand like a crazy person. I squinted, trying to figure out what was going on. Was she calling the HOA, a friend, her mom? I had no idea. But then I saw something that made my heart skip. Red and blue lights flashed at the end of the street. Sirens whined, soft at first, then louder. A police car was coming. My eyes went wide. No way, I whispered. Karen wasn't just mad, she'd called the cops. Over a crack in my driveway. I couldn't believe it. I stood there, shovel in hand, watching the car roll closer. Karen smirked from her porch like she'd just won a big prize. She thought she had me. She thought I was in trouble. But here's the kicker, she didn't know the truth. Not yet. That's where this story starts to get wild. See, I wasn't scared of the police, not one bit. Why? Because of my secret. It was something I'd been hiding since I got here. Something that made me different from everyone else in Pinewood Grove. Karen thought she was so smart, calling 911 like that. She thought she'd teach me a lesson, but she was about to learn one instead. The cop car stopped in front of my house and an officer stepped out. Karen crossed her arms, waiting for me to freak out. But I didn't, I just smiled. Because this was going to be fun. So there I was, standing in my driveway on that sunny afternoon. My name's Jake and I was just trying to fix a tiny crack in the concrete. It was no big deal, just a little line that I could patch up fast. I hadn't even picked up my shovel yet. I had it leaning against the house, right next to a bucket of stuff to fill the crack. I was ready to get to work, humming a little song, when suddenly, bam, Karen came charging over. Karen lived across the street. She was the boss of the HOA, which is a group that makes rules for our neighborhood. She always acted like she owned everything. That day she marched right up to me, her shoes smacking the ground hard. She stopped a few feet away and pointed at the crack in my driveway. "That crack's an eyesore," she barked. Her voice was loud and sharp, like a dog yapping at a stranger. She held her clipboard tight like it was her best friend and glared at me with eyes that could scare a cat. "An eyesore," I thought. That's just a fancy way of saying it looked bad. But come on, it was tiny. You'd have to squint to even see it. I looked at her, then at the crack, then back at her. It's not that bad," I said, trying to keep things calm. But Karen didn't like calm. Oh no, she liked rules. She liked yelling. She pointed again, harder this time, like the crack was some big, awful crime scene. "This neighborhood has standards, Jake," she shouted. "We don't let things get messy around here." Standards? I didn't get it. It was my driveway, not her house. Why did she care so much? I shrugged my shoulders and said, "It's my driveway, Karen. Relax. Simple, right?" I thought that would settle her down. Nope, big mistake. Her face turned red, bright red, like a tomato about to burst. Her eyes got big and her mouth opened wide. "Relax," she yelled. "Relax. You don't tell me to relax." She took a step closer, waving her clipboard like it was a sword. I could see her pen shaking in her hand. "I'm calling the HOA board," she said. "They'll deal with you." The HOA board? That's just a bunch of people who sit around making rules about grass and fences. I didn't think they'd care about my little crack. "Okay, Karen," I said, still chill. "Call whoever you want." I wasn't worried, not yet. She glared at me one more time, then spun around. Her shoes clicked loud as she stomped back to her house across the street. I watched her go, her ponytail bouncing with every angry step. She looked like a storm cloud ready to rain all over me. I shook my head and bent down to grab my shovel. "She's nuts," I muttered to myself. "It's just a crack." I figured she'd call her HOA friends, they'd talk about it, and that'd be the end of it. I'd fix the crack and life would go on. Easy peasy. But Karen, she had other plans. Big, loud, crazy plans. I started scooping some gooey stuff into the crack, smoothing it out with my shovel. The sun was warm and a breeze rustled the trees. For a minute I forgot about Karen. I was just Jake, fixing my driveway, enjoying my new house in Pinewood Grove. Everything felt normal. Then I heard it. Sirens. Yup, sirens. That high-pitched wail you hear when an ambulance or police car is coming. My head snapped up. "What the heck?" I said out loud. I dropped my shovel and ran to the edge of my driveway, looking down the street. Sure enough, red and blue lights flashed in the distance. They were getting closer. Fast. I peeked out my window to get a better look. A police car rolled up right in front of my house. My heart did a little jump, but I stayed cool. Then I saw Karen. She was back outside, standing on her lawn, waving her arms like she was trying to land a plane. Her phone was still in her hand, and she was shouting at the cop car. "He's ruining our property values," she yelled. "Property value? That's how much houses are worth." She thought my tiny crack was going to make everyone's house cheaper. I almost laughed, almost. The police car stopped and an officer stepped out. He was tall, with a hat and a shiny badge on his chest. He looked confused, scratching his head as Karen kept yelling. "Over here, officer," she shouted, pointing at me. "Look at that crack, it's a disgrace." The officer, his name tag said Dan, turned his head and squinted at my driveway. He didn't say anything yet, just listened as Karen went on and on. I called 911 because this is an emergency, she said. We can't have this kind of mess in Pinewood Grove. An emergency over a crack. I couldn't believe my ears. I stepped out from behind my window and leaned against the side of my house, crossing my arms. Dan, the officer, glanced at me. I gave him a little nod like, "Hey, can you believe this?" He nodded back, but Karen didn't notice. She was too busy flapping her arms and talking a mile a minute. "He's new here," she said. "He doesn't follow the rules. We need to stop him." Stop me from what? Fixing my own driveway. This was getting ridiculous. But here's the thing, Karen had no idea who she was messing with. She thought I was just some regular guy, some newbie she could boss around. She didn't know my secret. Nope, not a clue. I stayed calm, watching her make a fool of herself. My heart was beating a little faster now, but I wasn't scared, not even a little. Why? Because I had something up my sleeve, something big, something that would turn this whole crazy mess upside down, but I wasn't ready to show it yet, not quite. Dan, the officer, finally spoke. "Ma'am," he said, holding up a hand, "you called 911 about a crack in a driveway." His voice was slow, like he wasn't sure he heard her right. Karen nodded fast. "Yes, it's ruining everything. Look at it." She pointed again, her finger shaking. Dan sighed and walked over to my driveway. He bent down, looking at the crack. I'd already started filling it, so it was half fixed. "This," he said, glancing back at Karen. "This is what you called about." And Karen huffed. "Yes, it's against the rules." I couldn't help it. I smirked a little. Dan stood up and dusted off his hands. "Ma'am, 911 is for real emergencies," he said, "like fires or robbers, not cracks." Karen's face got even redder, if that was possible. "This is an emergency," she snapped. "You don't understand. Our neighborhood has standards." Dan raised an eyebrow and looked at me. I shrugged again. "I'm just trying to fix it," I said. He nodded, like he believed me, but Karen, she wasn't done. She stomped closer to Dan, her clipboard flapping. "Do your job," she yelled. "Arrest him or something." Arrest me for a crack. Now I really wanted to laugh. Dan put his hands on his hips and shook his head. "Ma'am, I'm not arresting anyone over this," he said. "Calm down." But Karen didn't calm down. She got louder. "I'll call again," she threatened. "I'll keep calling until someone fixes this." Dan sighed again, louder this time. I could tell he was tired of her already. I just stood there watching it all. Karen thought she was winning. She thought she had the power. She thought I was scared, but I was not one bit. See, Karen didn't know something important. She didn't know who I really was. She saw me as Jake, the new guy with a messy driveway, but I was more than that, a lot more. And soon, very soon, she'd find out. Not yet, though. I let her yell. I let her wave her arms. I let her think she was in charge. And because the longer she acted like this, the bigger her surprise would be. The tension was building, like a storm ready to break. Karen kept shouting, Dan kept sighing, and I kept smiling. The neighbors started peeking out their windows, wondering what all the noise was about. Kids on bikes stopped to stare. Pinewood Grove wasn't so quiet anymore. And me, I was right in the middle of it, cool as a cucumber. Karen had no idea what was coming. She thought she was messing with me. But really, she was messing with herself. So there I was, leaning against my house, watching this wild scene unfold. My name's Jake, and I was in the middle of fixing a tiny crack in my driveway when Karen flipped out. She called the cops, yup, the actual police, over that little crack. And now a police car was parked right in front of my house in Pinewood Grove. The officer stepped out, and I saw his name tag, Officer Dan. He was tall, with a dark blue uniform and a hat that sat a little crooked. He scratched his head, looking confused, like he wasn't sure why he was even here. Karen, the HOA queen from across the street, was still going nuts. She stood on my lawn, pointing at my driveway like it was some dangerous thing ready to explode. "Ma'am," Officer Dan said, his voice slow and calm, "you said this was an emergency." Karen's eyes got big and she jabbed her finger at the crack again. "Look at it," she shouted. "It's a disgrace, a total mess." Her voice was loud, like a teacher yelling at a kid who forgot his homework. She waved her arms so much, I thought she might fly away. Dan turned his head and looked at my driveway. The crack was small, barely a line in the concrete. I'd already started filling it with some gooey stuff, so it didn't even look that bad. He squinted, then glanced over at me. I was still leaning against my house, cool as can be. I gave him a little wave. "Hey Dan," I said, super casual, like we were old pals. He nodded back, a tiny smile tugging at his lips. That's when Karen's head snapped around. Her eyes got skinny like slits and she hissed, "You know him." Her voice was sharp like a snake about to bite. "See here, where it starts getting fun." Karen had no idea what was really going on. She didn't know that Dan and I went way back, way back. We weren't just buddies who waved hi. Nope, we had history. She also didn't know I'd been watching this neighborhood for weeks. Not as Jake, the new guy with a cracked driveway, but as someone else. Someone with a badge of my own. Yup, a police badge. I was undercover, keeping an eye on Pinewood Grove for a special reason. But Karen, she thought I was just some regular dude she could boss around. Boy, was she wrong. I didn't say anything yet, I just let her keep talking. She was digging her own hole and I wasn't about to stop her. Every shout, every wild wave of her arms was pulling her closer to a big surprise she'd never guess. I crossed my arms and watched, a little smirk on my face. Dan scratched his head again and said, "Ma'am, I need you to calm down. Tell me what's going on." Karen huffed, her face turning pink. "What's going on?" she yelled. "He's ruining our neighborhood. That crack is breaking all the rules. Property values are going to drop because of him." Dan looked at me again, then back at her. "A crack in his driveway?" he asked, like he still couldn't believe it. "That's why you called 911. Karen nodded fast. "Yes, it's an emergency. We have standards here." Dan sighed long and loud, like he was tired already. I couldn't blame him. Karen was a lot to handle. She kept going, stomping her feet now. "He's new. He doesn't care about our rules. Someone needs to teach him a lesson. Teach me a lesson." I almost laughed out loud. If only she knew. I decided to have a little fun. "Hey Karen," I said, keeping my voice nice and easy. "I'm fixing it right now, see." I pointed at the half-filled crack. "No big deal." She spun around to face me, her ponytail whipping through the air. "No big deal," she snapped. "You should have fixed it the day you moved in. This is Pinewood Grove, not some junky place." Junky? My house was brand new and the crack was tiny. She was acting like I'd dumped trash all over the street. Dan stepped between us, holding up a hand. Okay, he said, "let's all take it easy." He looked at Karen. "Ma'am, 911 is for real problems, like if someone's hurt or there's a fire, not for this." Karen's mouth dropped open. "Not for this," she yelled. "This is a real problem. He's breaking the rules." Dan shook his head. "It's his driveway. He's fixing it. I don't see a crime here." Karen crossed her arms and glared at him. "Then you're not doing your job," she said. Dan just stared at her like he didn't know what to say. I stayed quiet, watching it all play out. Neighbors were starting to peek out now. Curtains moved in windows and a couple of kids on bikes slowed down to stare. Pinewood Grove wasn't used to this kind of noise. Usually it was all birds and lawnmowers. But today was different. Karen was making a big scene and I was just standing there letting her do it. Why? Because every word she said was setting her up for something huge. She didn't know it, but I did, and Dan did too. See, Dan wasn't just any cop. He was my friend, my partner, actually. We worked together for years back before I moved here. When I said, "Hey, Dan," it wasn't just a hello. It was a signal. He knew who I was. He knew my secret. Karen thought he was here to help her, but really he was on my side. She didn't catch that little nod he gave me or the way his eyes twinkled when I waved. She was too busy yelling to notice. Days went by after that first cop visit, and Karen didn't let up. She watched me like a hawk. Every time I stepped outside, I'd see her across the street, staring. Sometimes she'd scribble on her clipboard. Sometimes she'd mutter to herself. Once I caught her taking pictures of my driveway with her phone. She's nuts, I thought, but I didn't say anything. I just kept fixing my house, painting the mailbox, mowing the lawn, patching that crack. I acted normal, like nothing was up. But inside, I was keeping track of her too. One morning, I saw her talking to some other neighbors. She was pointing at my house, shaking her head. I couldn't hear her, but I could guess what she was saying. "That Jake guy's trouble. Look at his driveway." The neighbors nodded, but they didn't look too sure. They'd waved at me before, said hi when I moved in. They seemed nice. Karen, though, she was trying to turn them against me. I didn't care too much. Let her talk. It wouldn't change what was coming. Then a few days later, it happened again. Sirens. I was in my garage tinkering with some tools when I heard them. I stepped outside and saw another police car pulling up. Karen was out there waving her arms again. "He's still breaking rule," she shouted as Dan climbed out of the car. He looked at me and rolled his eyes a little. I grinned back. Karen didn't see that either. "Officer," she said, "that crack's still there. He's not fixing it fast enough." Dan walked over to my driveway and looked down. The crack was almost gone now, just a thin line left. "Ma'am," he said, "it looks pretty fixed to me." Karen stomped her foot. "Not good enough," she yelled. "It's still ugly. He's ruining everything." Dan rubbed his face with his hand like he was done with her. "Ma'am, I've got real work to do," he said. "This isn't an emergency." But Karen wasn't listening. She kept going, louder and louder. "Do something about him," she demanded. "He doesn't belong here. Doesn't belong." That made me smirk again. If only she knew how wrong she was. I leaned against my garage door, watching her rant. Every shout was like a shovel digging her deeper. She thought she was winning, thought she was the boss, but she was wrong. Dan knew it, I knew it, and soon she'd know it too. Little hints were slipping out, like the way Dan smiled at me or how I wasn't scared at all. Karen didn't notice. She was too mad, too loud, but those hints were there, building up to something big, something she'd never see coming. The air felt thick now, like a storm was brewing. Karen's voice echoed down the street and more neighbors peeked out. Dan stayed calm, I stayed cool, and Karen kept digging. Every day, every yell brought her closer to the truth, and when that truth hit, oh, it was going to be good, real good. The next day came fast. I was still Jake, living in my new house in Pinewood Grove, trying to fix that tiny crack in my driveway. But Karen, she wasn't done with me, not even close. She'd already called the cops once, yelling about how my crack was ruining the neighborhood. I thought maybe she'd give up after Officer Dan told her it wasn't a big deal. Nope, Karen doubled down. She got even madder. That morning, I was inside, eating a bowl of cereal, when I heard it again, sirens, loud ones. I peeked out my window and saw not one but two police cars rolling up to my house. My heart did a little jump, but I wasn't scared. I was ready. Karen was outside already, standing on her lawn across the street. She had her phone in one hand and her clipboard in the other, waving them around like she was in charge. "It's a safety hazard," she shouted as the cars stopped. That crack could hurt someone. A safety hazard. Really, it was just a little line in my driveway, almost fixed by now. I shook my head and put my cereal bowl down. This was getting silly, but then I smiled. Today was the day. Karen was about to find out the truth. Officer Dan stepped out of the first car. He was the same cop from before, tall, with a blue uniform and a badge that glinted in the sun. Another officer got out of the second car, but I didn't know him. Dan looked at Karen, then at me, and I could see a tiny grin on his face. He knew what was coming. I took a deep breath and walked out of my house to meet him, but I didn't look like regular Jake this time. Oh no, I wasn't wearing my usual jeans and t-shirt. I had my uniform on, my police uniform. Full gear with a shiny badge pinned to my chest, a hat on my head, and boots that clicked when I walked. I looked like a cop because, well, I was a cop. Karen didn't see me at first. She was too busy yelling at Dan. "Look at it," she said, pointing at my driveway. "He's not fixing it fast enough. It's dangerous." Dan nodded, pretending to listen, but his eyes flicked over to me as I stepped outside. That's when Karen turned around. She saw me coming down my front steps, all dressed up in my uniform. Her jaw dropped, literally dropped, like her mouth forgot how to close. Her eyes got huge, and her clipboard slipped a little in her hand. I thought it might fall to the ground, but she caught it just in time. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Morning, Karen," I said, nice and calm. I adjusted my police hat, tipping it a little like they do in movies. "Heard there's a problem with my driveway." My voice was steady, but inside I was grinning big. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. Dan stood behind her and I saw him smirk. He was trying not to laugh. Karen blinked fast, like her brain couldn't keep up. "Wait, what?" she stammered. Her words came out all shaky. "You're a cop." She pointed at me, then at my badge, then back at me, like she couldn't believe her own eyes. I nodded, slow and easy. "Yup," I said, "undercover, been living here to watch the area." I let that sink in for a second. Karen's face went from red to white, like all the color drained out of it. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. I kept going. "Funny thing, Karen, your calls keep tying up the emergency line. That's not exactly legal, you know." I said it nice and simple, but I made sure she heard every word. Dan nodded behind her, crossing his arms like he agreed with me. Karen's head whipped around to look at Dan, then back at me. "Undercover," she squeaked. "You mean you're a policeman here?" She sounded like a kid who just found out her teacher was secretly a superhero. I shrugged. "Yup, been here for weeks, keeping an eye on things." I didn't tell her everything, not yet. I didn't say why I was watching Pinewood Grove or what I was looking for. That was still my secret. But this was enough for now. Dan stepped forward, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "you've called 911 twice now about a driveway crack. That's not what it's for." His voice was firm, like a dad telling a kid to stop being naughty. Karen shook her head fast. But it's a hazard," she said. "Someone could trip." Dan raised an eyebrow. "It's almost fixed," he said, pointing at the crack. And even if it wasn't, it's not an emergency. He looked at me, then back at her. And plus, Jake's one of us. He's not breaking any rules. Karen's mouth flapped open and shut like a fish out of water. She didn't know what to say. All this time, she'd been yelling at me, bossing me around, thinking I was just some new guy she could scare. But now she knew I was a cop, an undercover cop, no less. Her big plan to get me in trouble had backfired. Big time. Neighbors were watching now, peeking out their windows and stepping onto their porches. They'd heard the sirens and Karen's shouting. They wanted to see what was happening. And boy, were they getting a show. I took a step closer to Karen, my badge shining in the sunlight. So, I said, maybe next time just talk to me instead of calling 911, okay? I kept my voice friendly, but I meant it. Karen stared at me, her eyes wide. I didn't know, she mumbled. I thought you were just. Her voice trailed off. She didn't finish. She didn't have to. She thought I was just some regular guy, someone she could push around. But I was, and now she knew. Dan clapped a hand on my shoulder. Good to see you in uniform again, Jake, he said, loud enough for Karen to hear. Been a while, I grinned at him. Yeah, feels good, I said. We were buddies, partners, even. He'd known my secret all along. That's why he wasn't mad when he showed up. That's why he smirked when Karen yelled. He was in on it. Karen, though, she was out of the loop, until now. The other officer, the one I didn't know, walked over to Dan. Everything okay here? He asked. Dan nodded. Yup, just a little mix-up, he said. Right, ma'am. He looked at Karen, waiting for her to say something. She didn't. She just stood there, clutching her clipboard, looking like she wanted to disappear. The big reveal was done. The truth was out. I wasn't just Jake, the new neighbor. I was Officer Jake, undercover cop. And Karen, she'd messed with the wrong guy. Karen's big moment was over, and she didn't look so tough anymore. Her face went pale, like all the color ran away. When Officer Dan pulled out his little notepad, he flipped it open and started writing. Ma'am, he said, his voice serious but calm, misuse of 911 is a big deal. It's a serious offense. That means she broke a rule, a real one, not just her silly HOA stuff. We'll need to talk about this down at the station, he added, pointing to his police car. Karen's eyes got wide and she shook her head fast. But I didn't mean to, she said. Her voice was all shaky now, not loud and bossy like before. She tried to argue, but it didn't sound strong. She sounded scared. Dan didn't budge. He just pointed to the car. Let's go, he said. Karen looked around like she wanted someone to help her, but no one did. Neighbors were watching now, peeking out their windows and standing on their porches. They whispered to each other, pointing at Karen as she climbed into the back of Dan's police car. Her clipboard dangled in her hand and her shoulders slumped. She didn't look like the HOA queen anymore. She looked small. The car door shut with a loud thunk and Dan drove off. The sirens didn't blare this time, just a quiet hum as they disappeared down the street. I didn't say a word. I just turned around, grabbed my shovel, and went back to fixing that crack in my driveway. I scooped some gooey stuff into it, smoothed it out, and started whistling a happy tune. The sun was still shining, the birds were chirping, and I felt good. Karen had tried to make trouble for me, but it didn't work. Now she was the one in trouble, and I was just Jake, fixing my house like nothing happened. A week went by and things changed fast. Pinewood Grove got quieter, no more yelling, no more sirens. One morning I looked out my window and saw something new. Karen's house had a big "for sale" sign stuck in the front yard. The red and white sign wobbled in the breeze, telling everyone she was leaving. Turns out she didn't like living across from a cop, especially a cop who knew all her tricks. She'd spent weeks bossing me around, calling 911 over a tiny crack, and now she was packing up and moving away. Guess she didn't want to mess with me anymore. The neighbors noticed too. The same people who used to nod at Karen's lectures, those long talks about rules and grass and paint colors, stopped looking at her. Instead, they waved at me. "Hey Jake," they'd say when I walked by. "Nice day, huh?" They smiled and I smiled back. I wasn't just the new guy anymore. I was part of the neighborhood now. Kids rode their bikes past my house and the lady next door even brought me cookies one day. "Thanks for fixing that crack," she said with a wink. I laughed. It felt good to be liked. Karen's big plan had flopped. She thought she could scare me, but she scared herself instead. Justice was served not with yelling or fighting, but with the truth. I kept my secret until the right moment, and when it came out, everything flipped. Now the neighborhood was peaceful and I could enjoy my new home. Whistling, I finished that crack once and for all. It was gone like Karen's power over me. Okay, so here's the thing about what happened with me and Karen. Sometimes the loudest people, like the ones who yell and point and act all big, think they're the bosses of everything. They think they run the show, like they're the king or queen of the world. Karen was like that. She stomped around Pinewood Grove with her clipboard, shouting about my tiny driveway crack, telling everyone what to do. She thought she had all the power because she was loud and bossy. But guess what? She was wrong. Sometimes it's the quiet ones like me who hold the real power. See, I didn't yell back at Karen. I didn't argue or fight. I stayed calm and quiet, fixing my crack while she made a big fuss. She judged me by that little line in my driveway. She thought, "Oh, Jake's just some new guy, he's nothing special." But she didn't know the truth. She didn't know I was an undercover cop with a badge and a secret. When she found out, boom, her whole world flipped upside down. She never saw it coming, and that's the best part. The loudest person in the neighborhood got a big surprise from the quiet guy across the street. So here's a little tip for you. Next time someone tries to push you around, like if they're being mean or bossy or telling you what to do, just smile. Don't get mad, don't yell, just smile, because maybe you've got a surprise up your sleeve too. Maybe you're stronger or smarter than they think. Maybe you've got your own secret, something cool that'll turn everything around. You don't have to be loud to win. Sometimes being quiet and sneaky is the best way to show who's really in charge. Think about it. Karen thought she could scare me with her rules and her 911 calls. But in the end, she was the one who got scared. She packed up and left, and I stayed right here waving at the neighbors. That's power, the kind that doesn't need shouting. It's like a secret weapon you keep hidden until the perfect moment. And when you use it, oh, it feels so good. Like when I put on my police uniform and watched Karen's jaw drop. That was awesome. What about you, viewer? Have you ever had a moment like that? A time when someone thought they had you figured out, but you turned the tables. Maybe a bully at school tried to bug you, but you did something smart to surprise them. Or maybe you stayed quiet and let them trip over their own mess. I'd love to hear your story. Drop them in the comments below. I read every one. And hey, if you liked this wild ride with me and Karen, don't forget to hit that like button. It tells me you had fun. Life's funny sometimes. The loud people think they're the stars, but the quiet ones can steal the show. So keep your head up, stay cool, and maybe keep a little surprise ready. You never know when it'll come in handy. See you in the next story, friends. Bye for now.